What are Agile Ceremonies? Hey there, my name is Josh Fector and I'm one of the founders of Product HQ. And in this video, I'll start by explaining what exactly an Agile Ceremony is. Then I'll go through the 4 crucial Agile Ceremonies in order and how to get through them successfully. But before I get into all that, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that way whenever we come out with new content on how to build great products, you'll be first in line to know. And first here, we'll start with the definition. To describe the Agile Ceremonies, I'll give a quick refresher on what Agile means. The Agile framework called Scrum is a lightweight strategy of project management used to develop a product, typically in the software development space. See, the Agile framework is made up of a series of work sessions called sprints, and the Agile Ceremonies are sessions that stretch from the beginning to the end of a sprint. The Agile Ceremonies in chronological order are sprint planning, daily stand-ups, sprint review, and sprint retrospective, which ends a sprint. And now that we know the 4 crucial Agile Ceremonies, let's go ahead and break them down. Sprint planning takes place at the beginning of each sprint. If you want to have successful product development, you need to start on the right foot with a productive sprint planning. And the goal of sprint planning is simple: to set the teams up for the upcoming sprint. And during sprint planning, everyone on the team is made familiar with the sprint goals and how they will be achieved. And this involves breaking down user stories and product features into actionables, then assigning those tasks among the teams and team members. For every week of sprint, a team should have 1 to 2 hours of sprint planning. So if you're planning for a 2-week long sprint, then your sprint planning session should be 2 to 4 hours long. The sprint planning session requires the participation of the product owner, scrum manager, and the development teams. Although sprint planning follows a regimented, fast-paced, the exact procedure and length of the meeting will vary from company to company. If a sprint begins with the sprint planning, what comes next? Well, the Agile Ceremony is a daily stand-up. The daily stand-up, sometimes called the daily scrum, is an informal meeting that occurs for no longer than 15 minutes every morning of the sprint. And the goal of the daily stand-up is to bring teams together and assign everyone's tasks for the day. In addition to establishing the day's work, team members also identify any potential blockers in the way. And those team members anticipating blockers use the daily stand-up to ask for help from other team members and also make the necessary adjustments to their plans. The daily stand-up is also used to quickly brief others on the work that was achieved the prior day. But it's important to not get bogged down in the details. The daily stand-up is intended to be quick, so discussions about the prior day are only useful for identifying if teams are meeting their sprint goals. It is the scrum manager's role during this daily stand-up to keep all conversations relevant to the sprint goals. So the daily stand-ups are held each sprint day until our next ceremony, which is the sprint review. And the sprint review occurs at the end of the sprint. And it's an event in which the product owner, scrum manager, and team members present the work they completed during the sprint and get feedback from the stakeholders. Sprint reviews should last about 1 hour per sprint week. Sometimes they go over and it's really hard to keep them within that time frame. And so at the end of 2-week sprint, for example, the sprint review session should be 2 hours long. And the sprint review focuses on the product functionality, new user experience, customer value, and also how the achieved sprint goals benefit the business as a whole. And because this progress is being reported to external stakeholders, it's a good idea for teams to rehearse their presentations ahead of time. And sprint reviews are headed by the scrum manager and product owner. In addition to preparing for the sprint review, both the scrum manager and product owner should be prepared to answer any questions from the external stakeholders. After the sprint review, the product owner may need to adjust the product backlog to accommodate stakeholders' feedback. Although teams may discuss new tactics implemented during the sprint, it's recommended not to dwell on the blockages or conflicts faced. That's best saved for the next Agile Ceremony. The final Agile Ceremony is a sprint retrospective. During the sprint retrospective, team members look back on the sprint and identify both the successes and shortcomings. Neither the product owner nor the stakeholders attend the sprint retrospective. At the end of the day, the sprint retrospective is an opportunity for the scrum manager and development team to learn from the last sprint and also anticipate any blockers in future sprints. During the sprint retrospective as well, the scrum manager encourages the development team to speak up not only about the facts of the sprint, but also about any personal experiences and insights that could be helpful for the next sprint. In this way, the development team is improving with every iteration cycle, which is the overall goal of using the Agile framework of Scrum. Another task for the sprint retrospective is to assess how effective any newly implemented practices were to the last sprint. The only way for a sprint retrospective to be effective is if team members are honest about any complications, which is why it's important for the Scrum Manager to foster cultural alignment throughout the sprint. And once the team has gathered lessons from the sprint and they've anticipated any future blockages, they're ready to begin the next sprint iteration with another sprint planning ceremony. And there you have it, the 4 crucial Agile ceremonies in the Scrum framework: sprint planning, the daily stand-up, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. If you feel like you have a better understanding of this concept, then make sure to go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on how to build great products. And I'll go ahead and see you on some of those following videos. Cheers.